everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of The Debrief. My name is Representative Salman. I represent District 26, and I'm joined by 4 other phenomenal representatives in the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Terán, Representative Melody Hernandez, Representative Pam Powers Hannley, and Representative Daniel Hernandez. And we're here this morning to talk about the several attacks on reproductive freedom, specifically on abortion care and contraception, that we're seeing go through the Arizona State Legislature this legislative session. Now, for those of you who have been paying attention, but maybe for some people who missed it, Arizona is a pretty evenly divided state. We're a pretty purple state at this point. No one party really controls the agenda per se, but at the Arizona legislature, you would not know that. You would not know how thin the margins are. 31 Republicans, 29 in the House, 16 Republicans, 14 in the Senate, 14 Democrats. And so what we're seeing specifically with these extreme anti-abortion, anti-contraception bills are ones in which the Republicans are trying to fund organizations that provide disinformation for women seeking this reproductive health care. We're seeing them trying to criminalize women and their doctors, up to and including sentencing them to death for abortion care. And of course, everything in between those two extremes. So this morning, we are joined by multiple experts, and first up on the docket to speak and share with everyone today is Representative Terán. Representative Terán actually had the privilege a couple years ago of going to a country where abortion is currently banned, and not only banned, in addition to that, it's criminalized. And so I'm going to turn it over to Representative Terán, who can talk about what that experience was like. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yes, Representative Salman, thank you so much. In 2019, I had the opportunity to travel to El Salvador with 5 other legislators who went to El Salvador because El Salvador has a strict abortion ban. And also in their constitution, they have it that life begins at conception. So we came back with 3 major takeaways. You know, our biggest fear when we talk about abortion bans or even threats to taking away birth control, we fear that poor women and women of color are the ones who are the most at risk, the ones that would be criminalized first. And that was the case. We got to visit with 13 women in a prison in El Salvador who had either had miscarriages or had had abortions and were there completing a sentence sometimes of 30 to 40 years.
Wow.
So our takeaways, it was horrible. And I actually have a picture here on my desk to remind myself of the women.
It didn't matter if the pregnancy was terminated voluntarily or involuntarily due to miscarriage. The reality for the woman in El Salvador is any early termination of a pregnancy can be tied up into the criminal system. Is that correct, Representative Terán?
That's correct. And even ectopic pregnancies, doctors can act on ectopic pregnancies. And so, like I said, women who have access to doctors or crossing international lines will be able to resolve their reproductive health care. But women who are poor could not even have a procedure to in a way whatever happened with an ectopic pregnancy.
Wow. And those pregnancies, yeah, and that, I mean, that's just a lethal pregnancy, but it's one of the disturbing things that we're seeing among the conservative movement is really picking apart and going against the medical literature on pregnancies in general. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Melody Hernandez because you have a really compelling and powerful story about having to need this reproductive health care. And so I wanted to turn it over to you and just open it up to you, sharing your thoughts, sharing your story, and an interesting conversation you had with a constituent late last year.
I recently shared that I had an abortion for the first time in response to House Bill 2650, which was the bill that Representative Blackman introduced and that would make it punishable by death to receive or administer an abortion. And that story was incredibly hard for me to share. In 2019, the same year that Representative Terán was visiting those women in prison, I became pregnant. And this was a pregnancy that was not planned. When I first saw that I had tested positive, immediate horror washed over my body, and I felt like I was going to pass out. And as I continued to take test after test after test, that horror only grew inside me. And I knew that I was not ready to be a mother for multiple reasons. And for me, getting an abortion was the next right step for me. And so thankfully, I never faced any of the challenges that those women, Representative Terán, just talked about. But I did face barriers within Arizona. I learned how difficult it was to even set up an appointment. You know, they set it up in a way so that if you are working full time, if you're working during the day, it's incredibly hard to get an appointment because you have to set up one appointment, and then in order to go to the next step, you have to wait at least 24 hours. And I work full time as a paramedic, and I work a rotating shift, and it was difficult for me to try to get the time off to utilize their services. And then, I mean, I could go on, and it got to the point where I almost lost my life trying to get this abortion. And thankfully, I didn't. And fast forward, you know, talking about almost losing your life, I fast forward and later that year in 2019, you know, when I began running for office, I was stopped by a constituent who asked me how I felt about reproductive rights. And she started sharing her story about when she received an abortion before Roe versus Wade. And that to me was incredibly powerful because she shared details of a dark basement where she was alone with a doctor, an individual she did not know. She was alone with a doctor who was performing an illegal procedure, a procedure that, you know, put her life at risk. And as she finished up that procedure, you know, grateful that she had that she was able to receive those services, she left and she saw other women lined up outside ready to go into that dark basement and to get a procedure as well. And so I shared my story, and, you know, we talked about how wonderful it is to see how far we've come, but how horrible it was to still face these barriers that I faced. And now in this year, it's unheard of to see all of these horrible abortion bills that would bring us back to that era before Roe versus Wade. And now when we do have that constitutional right, you know, that's unacceptable.
And so Representative Powers Hannley, I want to turn it over to you because you remember an era that Representative M. Hernandez is describing where this wasn't legal. And also you have just been one of our most outspoken champions on maternal health and the fact that we have some of the worst rates in the country right now. So the floor is yours, and would love for you to touch on those topics.
Thank you, Representative Salman. I really appreciate this discussion. I think that it's an important issue. And like you said, you can tell from the color of my hair that I was around in the early 70s. In fact, I was a college student at Ohio State before Roe v. Wade was passed. Planned Parenthood was our savior. There was only one Planned Parenthood clinic in Columbus. I had to take a 2-hour bus ride from the campus to the Near East Side, which was the ghetto at that point, and to get birth control pills. And that was really our savior because abortion wasn't legal. I was living in a dormitory, and I can't tell you how many times I saw women crying in the hallway because they found out they were pregnant and they needed an abortion. And at that time, in the early 70s, that meant they needed a ride someplace. They needed a ride to New York City, which was about 12 hours from Columbus, or a ride to Detroit, which was about 5 hours. That we needed access to the birth control, and we needed access to abortion. And it was elation when that passed, you know, and to see that be under attack now, just for purely ideological reasons, is ridiculous. And as you mentioned, you know, I have been a champion for maternal and child health. I dug around in the data from the Department of Health Services, and, you know, we don't have access to care. If we are truly a pro-life state, then we should be helping these women and children who are living in poverty, but we're not. We want the babies to be carried to term, but once they're born, the state just pretty much casts them off. You know, you have to lift yourself up by your little flip-flops if you want to succeed in life, child, you know, because the state's not going to help you out.
Another example is just the fact that after 5 years, every single year, Rep. Powers Hannley and Rep. D Hernandez that we've been here, we still don't fund dentistry. We still don't fund oral health care for women who are pregnant, even though the facts show that it leads to healthier pregnancy. So again, this is not pro-life. Like, this is actually very much detrimental to women and children. Rep. D Hernandez, I'm so glad you're next, because I think you're the perfect person to wrap this all together. You know, in years past in the conservative controlled legislature, we've seen bills so extreme. We've seen bills attack the rights of a vulnerable group so much, like Senate Bill 1070 that went after immigrants, Senate Bill 1062 that was targeting our LGBTQ community, that it's had some pretty negative economic consequences on the state's branding and in what the state is able to do in the future. So I want to turn it over to you and see, with all the bills that we're seeing this session, what you think this could mean for Arizona's future.
I've been working on reproductive rights and freedoms for almost a decade. I started as a school board member who passed comprehensive sex education laws, only to find out that in Arizona, comprehensive doesn't actually mean comprehensive, because we have so many strings in terms of what we have to teach, with abstinence only / abstinence first being the guiding principles for any sex education here in Arizona. And up until 2 years ago, we had no promo homo, which meant that you couldn't even talk about the LGBTQ community without risking your funding as a school district. So I've been working on sex education for a long time. I worked at Planned Parenthood and actually helped start a national sex education program, trying to get more folks educated, because we know that one of the best ways to prevent unintended pregnancies is to make sure that people know how their bodies and how to protect themselves and how to have safe sex. So for the last 5 years that I've been here, there has been this obsession in what is already one of the worst states for access to reproductive health care to keep chipping away. And what we see with the bills that were introduced, particularly those that criminalize abortion, the heartbeat bill, and also the bill that criminalizes women who seek abortion, is this attempt by the far right to keep doubling down on failed and bad policy to the detriment of the rest of the state. So what's happening is we're seeing groups like the Center for Arizona Policy that don't care about Arizonans being successful. They care about their own fundraising, so that they can go back to their donors each and every single year and say, we were down at the Capitol and we got this bill passed. We are the most pro-life state yet again. And what's happening is we've seen a big backlash. And I think that's what it's going to take to see that we don't keep going down this path. Because what happened in SB 1070 and 1062 is people literally wouldn't come to Arizona. There are still states and localities that have travel bans to Arizona, not just because of how we've dealt with COVID, but before that, because they wouldn't spend money in our state. They just care about being able to say that they got one more thing done at the Capitol to undermine people's rights. So I think that's what's really harmful. And that's why we need everybody to step up, particularly those who can't have abortions. I've been in this fight for almost a decade, and I've never had an abortion. I will never have an abortion. But we shouldn't just say, this is not something that directly impacts me, and therefore I'm not going to speak out. We need everybody to step up and say, this is going to hurt our state, this is going to hurt our economy, and most of all, it's going to take away people's rights.
That is such a beautiful way to end this, because we know the other component is when we're taking away people's rights at the state level, they know that they've stacked the Supreme Court. And so the other component, to add on to what Representative D Hernandez was saying in this whole conversation, is that these bills are also designed to try and rewrite Roe v. Wade for the next generation, if not 2 or 3. So that's all the time we have today. But I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us to talk about this important topic. In the notes of this episode, we will have the bill numbers that are moving through the process, so you can go and contact your representatives and your senator and ask them to vote no on the bill. And then also please contact the governor and let him know that these pieces of legislation are way too extreme for Arizona. So thank you again for joining us this week, and tune in next week for the next episode of The Debrief.